The Scifi were born from silence. Their every motion, every word was measured. They spoke softly and sparingly, their voices like whispers against the backdrop of an endless void. To feel too deeply, to act too impulsively, was to risk breaking the harmony they had cultivated over centuries. Humans were nothing like them. They laughed too loudly, felt too much, and threw themselves into life with reckless abandon. They were a storm crashing against the Astrafi's still waters, and the Astrathi, to their shame, found themselves captivated. For Ambassador Iveria, that storm had a name: Nathan Carter. Iveria's first encounter with Nathan had been years ago, during a tense negotiation between humans and the Astrathi. She remembered his messy, unkempt hair, the way he leaned back in his chair like he owned the room. Humans were supposed to be diplomats, but Nathan Carter had brought none of the composure the role demanded. "What I'm saying," he had said, grinning as if the world itself amused him, "is that sometimes you have to take risks. You can't always predict what's going to happen." Iveria had bristled at his casual tone. "The Astrafi prefer certainty." "Sure," he'd said, shrugging, "but certainty's boring." She had dismissed him as reckless and undisciplined, but as the years passed and their work brought them together again and again, she began to notice the nuances beneath his brash exterior, the way he stayed late to help his team, the way his voice softened when he spoke about his family on Earth. She saw the kindness in his recklessness, the love in his chaos, and it terrified her. It was on Unity, during a lull between missions, that Nathan finally forced her to confront the tension that had been building between them. They were in the observation deck, the stars stretching endlessly before them. Nathan leaned against the railing, his posture casual, his expression thoughtful. "You ever wonder what it's all for?" he asked. Iveria tilted her head, her multifaceted eyes narrowing. What is for?" "All of it," he said, gesturing at the stars. "Life, existence. Do you ever wonder why we bother?" She frowned. "The universe is governed by order. Its patterns are clear. Its purpose evident." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You Astrathi are incredible. You see the stars and think of patterns. We see them and think of possibilities." Iveria opened her mouth to reply, but stopped. She was struck by the sincerity in his voice, the quiet vulnerability in his gaze. For a moment, she felt the wall she had built around herself begin to tremble. "Nathan," she began, but the words faltered on her lips. He turned to her fully, his expression soft. "What is it?" "Nothing," she said quickly, turning back to the stars. "It is nothing." The rogue star's flare struck the ship with the force of a supernova, sending the crew scrambling. Alarms blared, the lights flickering in a chaotic rhythm as systems failed one by one. "The core's overheating!" Nathan shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "If we don't stabilize it, it's going to blow!" Iveria forced herself to remain calm. "Options?" "Manual stabilization," Nathan replied, his jaw tightening. "But the radiation levels are lethal." The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled over the crew. "I'll go," Nathan said finally. "No," Iveria said, the word sharp and immediate. "You will not." Nathan turned to her, his expression steady. "Iveria, someone has to." "You are not the only one capable of sacrifice," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to control it. "I know that," he said softly, "but it has to be me." The humans in the room watched in grim silence, their expressions heavy with grief. The Astrafi stood motionless, their stoic faces betraying no emotion. But all eyes were on Iveria as she stepped forward, her composure crumbling. "Nathan, please," she said, her voice cracking. "There must be another way." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "Evaria." His voice was gentle, almost apologetic. "This is who I am." "And who I am," she whispered, her tears slipping free, "is someone who cannot lose you." For a moment, his resolve wavered, but then he smiled, a soft, sad smile that broke her completely. "I'll see you in the stars," he said. And before she could stop him, he was gone. Evaria stood at the glass wall of the reactor chamber, her hands pressed against the surface. Inside, Nathan worked quickly to stabilize the core, his movements sluggish as the radiation began to take its toll. "You are running out of time." Evaria's voice cracked over the comm. "I'm almost there," he replied, his voice faint. "Nathan, get out of there!" she shouted, her desperation palpable. "Please!" He looked up at her, his face pale, his body trembling. "Evaria." His voice was barely a whisper. "It's okay." And then, with one final surge of effort, he finished the override. The alarms silenced. The core stabilized. And Nathan Carter fell. The room was still. The humans stared in stunned silence, their eyes wide with grief. The Astrafi stood frozen, their expressions unreadable, but their silence was louder than any scream. Evaria pressed her forehead against the glass, her body trembling as sobs tore from her chest. She tried to hold them back, to contain them, but it was futile. The sound of her grief filled the chamber, raw and unrelenting. The humans exchanged glances, their own tears falling freely. Even the Astrathi, so stoic and composed, began to weep. "No," Evaria whispered, her voice breaking. "Nathan, no." Her cries echo through the silent ship, a melody of loss that none who heard it would ever forget. As the reactor hummed softly, the crew remained frozen in place. No one spoke. No one moved. They simply stood there, united in their grief. Evaria's sobs grew quieter, but the pain in her eyes remained. She stayed by the glass, her hand pressed against it, as if she could still reach him. And in that moment, as the humans wept openly and the Astrafi wept silently, something shifted. The walls between them, between their cultures, began to crumble. They were no longer Astrafi and human. They were simply people, bound together by love, by loss, and by the unbearable weight of what it meant to care.